Okay, there we go. Welcome, everybody. The Bowen Island Municipality Housing Advisory Committee for Friday, May 26th, 2023. I'll introduce the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or changes they'd like to make to the agenda? Nope, seeing none. Could we have somebody move the agenda? I'll move the agenda. Somebody second it. Anybody put your hand up? Thank you, Lois. Okay, and everybody all approved. I think I saw the hands go up, so we'll move on. Adoption of minutes. So we had two sets of minutes because we had a couple meetings very close together. So the March 31st and the April 17th. Were there any comments on them? I looked at them and they looked fine. I didn't see any issues. Any comments? I think, yeah, not seeing any. You can always come back if you do see something later on. Can somebody move for the March 31 and April 17th minutes be adopted? Yeah, okay, thanks, Lois. Second by Fritz. Everybody in favor? Looks like yes. Okay, thanks. Okay, moving right along. Public comments. Steph, anybody around? Nope, no public comments. Moving right along. 4.1. Daniel Martin, Housing Accelerator Fund. Take it away, Daniel.
Thanks, Robin. I know we had this on the agenda at a previous meeting, and I feel like it was a full meeting and we didn't really get a chance to discuss it. But this is a fund or a grant opportunity that's done by the federal government and CMHC that is intended to provide incentives for municipalities to accelerate the supply of housing in their jurisdiction, and particularly over a 3-year period. And so that they put on an application guide with sort of what's required for it. And they've said that the intake for the grant will happen in the summer of 2023. And so one of the pieces that we have to do is calculate current housing growth targets over the next 3 years, and then estimate how much we could increase that amount over the 3-year period. And your funding is based essentially on your projected additional growth. And then the other piece that's required from it is you need an action plan that comes with your application and identifies sort of actions that you will take over the 3 years that will help bring things on stream. One of the key challenges we've had with doing this is sort of the timeline. So your funding is based on what you say your growth will be in 3 years, and then it actually, how much money they give you is dependent on if you hit those targets. So if you say like, oh, Bowen will grow 1,000 units in 3 years, we should get lots and lots of money, but then we don't actually have permits for those, then they'll take it back. So some of the things that we know are impediments to growth on Bowen, like our current issue with our sewer system in Snug Cove. You know, we'd like to be able to say, well, if we have money to increase the size of the sewer plant, we know that that's an impediment to housing growth in the Cove. And with a increased sewer plant, we could have more housing potentially in the Cove, but it wouldn't happen in a 3-year term. So we wouldn't actually be able to deliver permits and units within that time frame. And then the funding available, or like the sort of the grant criteria, are based on partly like what's your projected growth rate anyways, and then how much can you increase that, you get additional funding. So we've looked at doing some look at, okay, what's the projected growth rate going forward, and then what would we safely predict as increases, and sort of talked internally about, you know, do we go for like a large application or just like a smaller, more targeted application. And I can share some of the numbers we've been playing with. Let me just see. Let me share my screen, and I apologize. This is not sort of, this is not a presentation, but more is just the numbers. So what essentially I've looked at is what can you see that? You see my Excel?
Yes, we can see the Excel.
Hide that. Okay. Maybe I'll zoom in. Essentially just looking at census numbers on Bowen of number of units. So the fund is looking for a number of housing units rather than occupied units. And so sometimes on Bowen, our growth has been in change from unoccupied units to occupied units has been one of the key drivers of our growth that doesn't factor into this. But essentially looking at, okay, what are the census numbers 2011, 2016, 2021, and then averaging the numbers in between, just essentially smooth it and say what's that average annual rate. And if I project that, so the same growth of units that was from 2021 to 2016 and project it forward, I can get a baseline for annual projected growth rate without the housing accelerator fund. Would say from 2023 to 2026, we would anticipate a growth of 73 units over that time period. And then sort of for, for sort of calculation purposes, what I considered was looking at what would it look like if we just took that same growth rate over that period and just added the 24 units that Birch is proposing on lot 3 as an example, which is 24 units, and said, okay, what effect would that have on our growth rate? And essentially that would come out with, would instead be 97 units over the 3-year period. And then if I just change here, what the CMHC has put out is just this handy calculator, so people don't have to try to do math on their own, which is nice. And so just plugging in those numbers, okay, we estimated then our current dwelling housing stock of 2,084. So that's just the growth from 2021 to 2023, which is when the calculation starts. And then saying we were looking at 73 units without the Housing Accelerator Fund. And then we would say 97 with the Housing Accelerator Fund. And that does produce numbers that say the annual growth rate is higher than the threshold for the grant, and that the percent change is higher than the threshold from the grant. So it's like we would be eligible for that type of application. And then just in this part of the spreadsheet I was just looking at, they estimate a base funding of 20,000 per unit that you project going forward, and then they project additional based on if it's like transit-oriented housing or if it's affordable housing. And so potentially if that was the target, if we're saying our target is 24 additional affordable housing units, then it could be more like, we've sort of seen numbers of like 40,000, which would then be sort of $1 million provided. Or if it's 20,000, it's like $500,000, give or take. But there'd always be the slight risk of, or there'd always be the risk in terms of getting numbers clawed back if our growth slows. So if like interest rates climb and people build less housing on Bowen, which we have seen probably this year compared to the last couple of years, that we wouldn't receive the full amount of funding because our growth would be lower than what we'd projected. And then, so that's sort of part one of the application, is sort of what the current growth projected is, and then what we would project, how much of an increase do you think we're projecting based on actions taken. And then, so then the second part is the development of that housing action plan itself. And so it wants that housing action plan that comes with the grant. And so in their guide, especially for small rural communities, they say we need at least, we need some of these initiatives, but they sort of list a whole number of them that are say like, you can select from this list and essentially like pick. They don't need to develop entirely new items. So they have, 2 pages of lists of things that they've listed. And one of the things that I went through and looked at was like, which of the items on the action plan that they list are things that either, the Housing Advisory Committee has talked about, things that I know we already have council direction to undertake, or things that we've done in the past. So some of these involve, like revised parking requirements for new developments, which we've done for developments in the Cove. And I know we have a current application to reduce parking. So maybe it's that, our land use bylaw instead acknowledges lower parking requirements for multifamily or for affordable housing developments or whatever it may be in Snug Cove. There's a number around development charges and development cost charges and implementing certainty in those. And we have council direction to develop development cost charges for our sewer and water districts. There's some other pieces that, could be considered by the Housing Advisory Committee and council in terms of like waiving public hearings for affordable housing projects that conform to the official community plan. implementing e-permitting, which is something we have underway for building permitting and looking to do for other permits. A process for disposal of city-owned land, or partnering with nonprofit housing providers. Are sort of things that I flagged as like sort of achievable actions within that action plan. Yeah, I feel like I've done a lot of talking on this, so I was going to stop sharing and open it up to the committee. But we're sort of aware that, you know, they said early summer 2023 would be when their intake would be, and before that we would need an action plan developed that council endorses. So it starts looking like, oh, do we need an action plan by the first July meeting of council or by the end of June meeting of council to have an application ready to go? Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. That's a really good overview. Does anybody on the committee want to jump in with thoughts or questions?
There was a seminar. Daniel, did you get the invite from CMHC for the session on how to do your action plan, which is on the 31st?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess my concern is, I think there's a minimum threshold we've got to increase by, right?
Yeah.
And that's 10%?
Yeah, so that was, let me find it. That was this calculation. So our annual growth rate has to be higher than 1.1%, and the annual growth rate percentage change must be higher than 10%. So I took a lot of time trying to calculate this on my own and getting myself confused in Excel, and then found that they have since put out this calculator in the page. So it can, you know, matches what I calculated, which was nice, but it also says that, you know, just based on this sort of what I'm calling like a minimal application, we would exceed both those thresholds.
Oh, okay. So 97 over 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And that's essentially that calculation of how much we growed the last census period over the 5-year average. And then it's just assuming that same growth rate.
So our
Daniel, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'm just sort of thinking our traditional sort of occupancy permits or building permits for new houses has never been much more than 20 per year, right?
I know, so I think like that census period included, it didn't include Belterra, but it did include like the Bellringer apartment. What else did it include? And I mean, yeah, and the census captures like new units, so it would capture like someone putting in a secondary suite. But so would our permitting data though, so that would mirror.
So
Go ahead, Fritz. Yeah.
Yeah, Danielle, when you were playing with that base funding number, how does it get established? You first at 20,000, then you went to 40,000.
Yeah. Let me find that in their guides.
Danielle, I can speak a little bit to the funding if you want.
Sure, I'll just pull this one up because it's in there.
Okay.
So here they have this star. So they say that there's per unit amounts for base funding, and then there's top-up funding and affordable housing bonuses. They're estimated amounts. So they say it will depend on like their uptake of units. So they're estimating your base would be 20,000, and then somewhere they've got, oh, right down here. So top-up funding, like multi-unit housing in close proximity to rapid transit, multi-unit housing missing middle, multi-using housing other, top-up potential, affordable housing bonus, 19,000 per unit.
Okay.
So yeah, but they're being very cagey on it in terms of estimates, and they've said that, although they haven't that I've heard yet, but they've said that they'll open applications actually open to large cities first, that they estimate will have the majority of the growth, and then they'll be better able to estimate how much funding is actually available.
Oh, so we're getting the leftovers.
Oh.
Danielle, so
Yeah.
with the when you went through this process, because there's something weird about it, like it measures the growth in units, which on Bowen is mostly single family, while what we're missing is actually the other part.
Mhm.
So they're not missing. That doesn't really reflect the true demand, of course. It's just a calculation.
Yeah.
There's no relationship between the increase in single family homes and the demand for everything that isn't single family. Do they acknowledge that anywhere, or is it just like, I guess I'm saying, if you're in a municipality that has a large growth in the units that we're looking for, right? Then their numbers come out much higher. If they have growth in apartments or smaller units, right? But it's kind of weird that we measure something that we don't want to establish what we do want.
Well, it's units, Fritz.
Well, it's units, but it is you need a pile of money to buy one of those, and you know what I mean. And as if you read the various comments on growth on Bowen, one of the developers said, if you manage to build it, they'll buy it. So you know what I mean. So
you're saying affordable housing units, like. Because I mean, there's 37 units in the bell ringer.
I think the calculation, but Danielle does make sense because he's following the prescribed calculation that he has to follow, right? But I'm just saying is that I'm just asking Danielle when he was doing it, how do you feel that actually reflects, or is it the fairness of the calculation of how appropriate it is for Bowen Island, that kind of thing?
It's a funny grant. Like, it's different than any I've seen before. It's clearly like the federal government trying something different and new. Like, so, I mean, one answer, I guess, is like they're trying to provide that top up for multi-unit housing. So trying to say, like, we're going to give you more money if you do more multifamily housing, you know, close to rapid transit or, you know, townhouse development or whatever. But it's also a strange, it's a strange grant in that, like, what your plan says you're going to spend the money on doesn't have to match what your plan says how you're going to promote the unit. So like if you were a community that didn't allow secondary suites and you just said, well, one of our actions is we're going to allow secondary suites and we estimate there'll be X number of units in secondary suites, you would get funded for that. And then you could say, well, our money is going to go to repair this existing affordable housing project that won't increase any units and isn't related to the secondary suites at all. And that's okay. Like, they don't have to be linked. It's very strange.
But they wouldn't have the end result of the right number of units.
You would if you know, there's a huge pent up demand for secondary suites and people built them, you would hit your targets and you could spend the money on something else completely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Fritz. And actually, sorry, before we move on, I realized we haven't introduced Natasha. I think she has been at one of our meetings before, but maybe for our new members. Daniel or Natasha, do you want to introduce yourself? Or
Sure, I'm Natasha. I'm the Island Community Planner here. And so I was supporting Daniel in reviewing the Housing Accelerator Fund. So I just popped in to say hello and just to provide any comments or answer any questions people might have.
Great, thank you. You're very welcome. So maybe Lois, Greg, I'll kind of go to you if you have any thoughts or questions about any of this. I mean, I have one or two for Daniel. Just to clarify, so we all know the facts, it's based on building permits, right? So by the time, whatever the date is, July 1st in 3 years, whatever that timeline is, it's building permits. So they don't actually have to be built, but building permits have to be issued.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay, so just to clarify.
Yeah.
And then do they actually give you all the money, or is it kind of doled out in phases? I seem to remember when I was perusing this last month, it was sort of doled out in phases.
It's doled out in phases. They're like,
okay.
I'm just trying to look.
Yeah, you kind of have to meet like a couple benchmarks or something and they give it out. That's what I thought. Yeah. So it's not like they just give you $1 million and you have to hold on to it and hope, cross your fingers that, you know, things happen. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Greg, Lois, any comments or thoughts? Look, it's up to unmute, Lois. Oh, yeah, just unmute and
there we go. So, you know, I'm new to all the ins and outs of this, but I was reading that in the undercurrent, I guess, that the Bowen Senior Housing Project is not gonna go. This wouldn't help that out at all, would it?
From what I've heard, I feel like their funding gap, like it couldn't make it happen. Like I think the goal, as I see it, and like council may differ, but like the plan has to say, okay, this is what we're going to spend the money on. And in part, what I'm thinking is what we spend the money on is the money would go to our housing reserve fund, and then council could use it as grants for like affordable housing projects.
Yeah, it's a
But-
tricky one because even, oh, sorry to interrupt, Daniel, but like even from Birch's side, I'm thinking, oh, like it could go to Birch, it could go to Snug Cove House, but then it's very hard for that funding application because you can't really rely on that money. So in our funding application and in everything we're doing, we couldn't say, oh, great, we're getting $1 million from this
Yeah.
housing accelerator fund, because there's no guarantee that once we've built the building, we're actually going to get that. And it's weird because it's totally out of our control. Like I say, if interest rates go up and all of the housing, like single family houses that are really consistently built on Bowen, if they all slow suddenly in the next 3 years, nothing to do with us, we wouldn't get the money, even though maybe we built a bunch of affordable housing. So it's really tricky. And I think that's a great idea because I did see that announcement about Snug Cove House, which is just so sad. But it's really tricky funding. Like Daniel said, it's so weird because it's not like you can rely on it. Once you're approved, oh, great, we're getting the money. It's not. And it's reliant on so many outside factors.
So, I mean, almost more realistically, it depends. But like, let's say Birch gets fully funded by BC Housing, goes ahead, we get and growth happens on Bowen, we get the full funding, it goes in the Housing Reserve Fund, then it's available for like the next project is kind of a more almost like realistic way that then we can provide, somebody could apply and say grant funding, and then we could say, yes, we commit to this much money for your project. And then people could use that in their budget to seek other funding because they have it actually committed. Whereas like Birch, if we say, we would like this grant and council says, yes, we would like it to fund the affordable housing project on lot 3. We support it. Yeah. How much can we guarantee versus like expect somebody to go ahead to build and then we're like, oh, sorry, not enough people built, you only get 2/3 of the money. It's tricky.
Yeah, it is. It's tricky. Okay, Greg, go ahead.
When you crunch the numbers, Daniel, to Chris's point, was there any trends as far reflecting the amount of applications vis-a-vis the way the prices of doing business and the market was going over that time? And
yeah, I mean, I feel like like I've just looked at census. It was 2021 was the census year,
right?
I feel like in somebody who monitors our building permit revenue with a sort of stressful eye, that like this year is slower than last year and slower than 2021.
Right. Okay.
It's hard to know, what's 2025 going to look like. I don't know. Yeah. So, I mean, but all of that kind of pins me towards like putting in an application, but putting in a more conservative application that I'm more certain of,
Right.
and we're more able to realize the money in it.
And is there risk, or is there risk in putting in an application? And as we put in an application, we don't meet the targets, they take the money back. If we meet the target, we get to keep the money, and then earmark it for other stuff moving forward, not necessarily for any of the permits that have been issued, dependent on this money. Is that correct?
That's kind of what I see it. Like I see it hard if it was, it's almost hard to depend on it. So yeah, put in an application, okay, it'll take staff time over the next month or 2. And then if we get the money, there's like reporting requirements and whatever else. But as long as we then like don't fully commit that full amount of money to something and run the risk of pulling it back, and that we're just clear that like this is how much is available to commit to projects is only the money that can't get clawed back.
Right.
Yeah.
And no building permits and applications that are put forth would be contingent on this money.
Yeah.
It can't be.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks,
Okay.
Greg. I feel like that's probably the way to go. And that sounds like, Daniel, maybe that's the way you're leaning, is let's put in an application because why not? It's free money if we can get it. just earmark it that it'll go into the housing reserve fund for future use if and when it actually ever happens. Or for whatever, obviously council can, decide what that
Yeah.
exactly, but essentially we're not promising it, we wouldn't plan to promise it to any one project or count on
Yeah.
it, because you couldn't. And then my only thing is, what if we put in an ambitious application? Again, ambitious for Bowen, like they're talking about
Yeah.
numbers of tens of millions of dollars. We're talking about, 20 units or something like that. What if we do put in and again, realistic, right? With the Birch
Yeah.
project, maybe even the Snug Cove House project, which I know now isn't going ahead, but who knows? Maybe something happens in
Yeah.
the next 3 years if they get funding. Is there a downside to putting in an ambitious one? Because I'm wondering if we put in a small one, we can't get more then, right? If we
Right.
exceed, do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whereas if we put in
Yeah.
a big one and we only meet this much, they'll just give us that much. So I sort of feel like let's that would be my
Play
idea.
with that. Okay.
Play with it a little bit, put in, something that's reasonable, but a bit ambitious, and then we just get less money and whatever, right?
It's
Yeah.
true, because we could say, okay, we've done all these things, and so it actually will lead to, 5 more units each year over the 3 or something modest. Maybe that's defensible. And I mean, the big unknown for me too, that I don't think we've talked about at length at this committee, in part, there's not much to talk about, but the province has said in the fall, they will bring legislation so that a single family lot has to be permitted to have 3 or 4 units on it.
Right. Like duplex with suites and stuff like that, is it? Or
Well, they just said, I think 3 or 4 units in most areas of the
Wow.
province. And that's
Wow.
literally the extent of the announcement.
Yeah.
But, you can imagine sort of how that would change if every lot on Bowen, subject to, water septic, could have 3 or 4 units, because suddenly a 5-acre lot that has room for septic and on their own well.
Yeah.
Somebody could buy it to build a fourplex to share with their friend or whatever.
Yeah. That could be a real shift.
What would be a growth driver, but I don't want to put that that's not our action, and it's hard to predict at this point, but
Yeah. So why don't we shift gears and focus on what feedback would you like from us? Do you want to sort of review those action plans and get some feedback from us on what we think is realistic? Or is it just a yes, go ahead, you have enough from us today? Or what would you like from us today, Daniel?
I mean, I think do we have another meeting scheduled?
I don't think we have one on the
okay.
books. No,
Yeah,
but we can.
Okay. We can work on that, because I think I would
today.
like to almost, that we draft a housing action plan and draft an application and then have a chance to run it by the committee. And then I don't know, in terms of this committee meeting today, if there's value sort of going through that list of housing action plan items that sort of they list, or if you'd rather just review it and send us thoughts that people have on this could be in a housing action plan, and then we will essentially work to compile.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe, because I think we do have time. We don't have a heavy agenda today. Do you want to just go through the list you highlighted?
Sure.
Rather than the entire list, and that can be an open invitation if people want to go through that entire list in the CMHC application, and if there's something that jump out at you. But let's maybe go over your sort of shortened list.
Sure.
And I think maybe just see if anything jumps out. Anybody jump in if there's thoughts on anything, and then we can move on to the next thing on our agenda.
So this is fully me doing it based on these are things that seem achievable or that are already in the works or we've done in the past. So this is sort of consistent with my lower ambition application. Okay, so implement revised parking requirements such as reduce or eliminate parking spaces for new development. So
could that look like a change to the parking bylaw to say something like affordable housing projects that meet certain criteria could be eligible for this? Is that it could be simple? Okay, that's
what I think I would see. So council's given variances to projects in the past, especially in Snug Cove, and I think it would be highlighting affordable housing projects that are defined as X. It's half a space per unit instead of 1 space per unit or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Ensuring that development and amenity charges fees, blah, 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 are clear, transparent, and predetermined, not subject to negotiation. So I flagged this one because I felt this was coming off of work that we had actually just done in the committee level in terms of talking about cash in lieu contributions to affordable housing. Yeah. So I thought, we discussed that at some level, and that could be an action plan item, is establish cash in lieu contributions for affordable housing. Yeah. Seems achievable and seems valuable for
Mhm,
potential future development.
mhm.
The next one down, aligning development charges with the cost of infrastructure and servicing. So we have an outstanding action item in terms of development cost charges. So one for the Snug Cove sewer and then for water districts more generally. So that's been on our CAO's work plan. And some of the first steps for that are sort of consulting with landowners and developers in the Snug Cove sewer area and then establishing charges. But yeah, as it's on our work plan anyways, I was like, okay, we'll add that as a housing action plan, provides
Yeah.
value. This next one I know is near and dear to Fritz's heart. So implementing incentives, costing or fee structures, for example, density bonusing to encourage such things as affordable housing. So that having that as an action plan in terms of density bonusing could be
Well, I
worthwhile
think-
and
'cause-
give
and that
impetus.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I think that could be part of what we've talked about. We have an affordable housing policy and we've talked about a housing policy,
Yeah.
right? So maybe that would become, and especially we'd have 3 years to work on it. That could be part of development of a housing policy to include those things.
Waiving public hearings on all affordable housing projects that conform to the official community plan. So this is a change a year or two ago in the Local Government Act, meant that if a rezoning conforms to the official community plan, so it's just a change to the land use bylaw and not the OCP, council can waive the need for a public hearing. You have to give essentially alternate notice, but you don't need to hold a separate public hearing. We did this once for a rezoning that was on associated with the multi-use path, where it's like at the four corners, the lot, the old gas station lot and the municipality owned lot beside it. We had an arrangement to do a land transfer, but they were in different zones. We had to exchange this slight amount of land and have these slightly different zoning. So we waived the public hearing for that. But it could be a policy in like if we have a housing policy or even in the affordable housing policy, it could say, okay, if it's a rezoning that's an affordable housing project and this is what it's defined as and it conforms to the OCP, we will waive a public hearing, or council will consider waiving a public hearing. Something like that, where it's just policy work that makes it clear that that's not required. This is a project we've had underway in terms of e-permitting for building permits and looking at expanding it to include like development permits and development variance permits. So it's not super exciting, but for us, it's exciting in terms of internal tracking and application processing, e-permitting, and some benefits in terms of.
Takes it less time to do it, right? That's what they're promoting with this one, I would think.
In theory, somehow it never seems to be the case, but in theory, it does it. And I'm kind of excited too in terms of it has potential for like better communication tools and tracking and numbers and even like public access to see where applications are might be improved.
The other thing that occurs to me about that one, about new enhanced processes separate from e-permitting, I wonder if there's, because we have talked about it in the past on this committee, is something like a partnership type thing. So if there is somebody who say owns a piece of land and wants to do a rezoning, like I think I forget what the mechanism is that exists now where you can apply. It's basically a little partnership if you have a little project.
Public-private partnerships? P3s?
No, that wasn't what I was thinking. I know Bowen has one that
community service or no?
Community, something like that. But anyways, essentially, if somebody wanted to apply for rezoning, just like not a big developer, just a small person, and it was for something that, the community wanted, like, diverse housing or something like that, that there would be, I think Steph had a collaborative services agreement. Just put it in the chat. I think that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe it's sort of an expansion of collaborative services agreement, or maybe that it covers it already and we just promote it more for housing. Anyways, that's just kind of something that we've talked about, because the thinking behind it is the rezoning process is very onerous, expensive, and time consuming. And if somebody's actually wanting to do something that's in line with what we're trying to get, and I would think the OCP as well, and it's like all in line with it, is there a way that we can, support them and do something like that? So maybe that's just another possibility in that one. But e-permitting seems like a no-brainer, and you're already doing it. So that's great.
Created this process for the disposal of city-owned land assets for the development of affordable housing as of right, not requiring rezoning. So this is something that has been done to some extent for the Birch project in terms of we have an agreement to lease community lands. It's something that the municipality has talked about in other community land sites. So maybe it's developing better process for how that happens, and trying to work to identify definitively what those sites are.
The not requiring rezoning in brackets is a funny one.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that's saying the land's already zoned for that particular use or density or something, and you're just.
I think so. I think it would be, the idea behind it would be that like the city would rezone the land, like identify where they want the housing to go, and then rezone it and then
In
dispose of
advance.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, got you.
To some extent, that's the idea, I guess, behind like the land south of Belterra, where it was area 2 of lot 1. Like the municipality, we rezoned that lot, or that portion of that lot, for a housing project. The idea being that then when we dispose of it, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
And then finally, partnering with nonprofit housing providers to preserve and increase the stock of affordable housing. So I know Councillor Tim Wake, who's not here today, has been working on that idea in terms of creating partnerships with Birch, with nonprofit housing providers. So again, something to include in the action plan.
And Daniel, we've got those expressions of interest we sent out for area 2 of lot 1. So
yeah,
we've got something sort of
yeah,
underway in a way that we've got to pursue.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, so anybody else on the committee have thoughts? I mean, those all, I think you've done a great job, Daniel. Lots of those. We only need 5, and a bunch of those seem achievable or underway, or okay.
That's one.
Fritz?
Yeah, Danielle. For it says, it's kind of a bit strange. It says for affordable housing, but affordable housing, if you don't, no public hearing required for affordable housing, but affordable housing is many times just a small component of a larger project. And then I figure from why only affordable rental housing, or affordable housing can be affordable market and can be affordable rental, but I think it's more important that its rental is included in it. And the problem probably is that most buildings aren't exclusively affordable, but they are many times exclusively rental. So it should probably say, you know what I mean? If you have a rental building, it has a component of affordable housing in it. It still needs a public hearing because it's mostly rental housing and not affordable housing.
Yeah.
To have a whole project of affordable housing is pretty hard to get.
I mean, I agree. I think that's almost the trickiest part of that one is what is this? If it's like, it's a market condo building, not that we have many of those on Bowen, but hypothetically, it's a market condo building where 10% of the units are affordable, whatever that means. Or now it's 15, so I think I would be looking at other places' definitions, or other places that have like separate definitions for, what's an affordable housing project, right? Because in my mind, almost it's like, well, it means it's funded by BC Housing. They have a funding agreement and it's meeting BC Housing requirements, which is like the last grant round was like a third of them are rent geared to income and a third of them are shelter rate and a third are market rental or something like that. But it's that type of development.
But Danielle, if it would actually be, it would be an enormous incentive to developers, because public hearings are the worst thing ever for public processes. We're just going through one of them in Gibson's. It's just horrendous.
Yeah.
Because in the last minute, the community is paying attention with, very well organized groups that may not be totally in support. So what I'm saying is that if you want more affordable housing and projects that provide a specific percentage of affordable housing, this is not going to happen, okay? But I'm just going to say, if you give a huge incentive to a developer, and because they provide a significant part of affordable housing and it doesn't have to go to a public hearing, I can tell you one thing that makes a huge difference to developers, because everybody talks about clarity. You don't get the clarity of the $20,000, right? For a developer, that is putting years and years of effort in and still not knowing what they actually can build or if they can build. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think the reality of this one too, though, is that so it conformed to the official community plan. There's not many locations I would point to on Bowen that it's like you would require a rezoning, but not an OCP amendment to develop, multifamily
Yeah.
dense housing.
Yeah, but they both have public hearings, right?
So
OCP.
like if you need an OCP amendment, though, we can't waive a public hearing. Like you would need to go to a public hearing regardless to do the OCP amendment. So this is only available as a tool if it conforms to the OCP but needs a rezoning.
I think I'm going to interject because we have other things to move on to
Yeah.
today, and we can always dive into that one in future
Yeah.
to figure out how we're going to potentially implement it or
Yeah.
help in implementing it. But great discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, Daniel, keep us in the loop. Obviously, we'll set another meeting before the end of today. And if you want to think about when that would be good, just in terms of timing for you, let us know by the end of the meeting if it's, when you'd like feedback from us on the application, basically. I know there's not a hard application date yet, but if it would be good for us to meet, say, in a month's time or early July, or, kind of have a think about that.
I think realistically, it's like we would want this to go to council for approval at the July 10th meeting.
Okay.
Just assuming that I don't know when they're going to open their application window, but if they say summer, it's like, well, then I would like it approved July 10th for council, which means then we'd be looking at like a last week of June.
Yeah. Okay. So let's aim for that.
Something like that.
Okay. All right, let's do that at the end, but keep that in mind. Okay, so moving along. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Natasha. The next item, 4.2, is the 2023 Housing Advisory Committee work plan. And we've had this on the agenda for a while, and we've had very, very busy meetings the last few meetings, so we have not got to it. Which is great because I actually had a review of it ahead of the meeting, and some I think are relevant and some maybe aren't. So it's good. We can have a look at it. Steph, I don't know if you have it up on your screen. You want to share? If you want me to share my screen. Oh, I can't hear you, Steph, for some reason. That's weird. We can't hear you. Nope, nothing. That's okay. I can share my screen if that's useful. Just tidy it up a little bit here. Share screen. Oh, Steph's saying she can. Yep, just give her a sec. So one of the things, the first one on the list is the Cluster Zoning Committee of the Whole. So I don't know how we tackle that. I guess we'd probably have to go to Councillors Morrison Wake to kind of maybe lead the charge on that one. It was a report that we did last year on cluster zoning. We also have the housing targets report, which I'm not sure that was ever reviewed either. So maybe it's the idea of like a committee of the whole just on housing in general. And we could look at the target report, we could look at the cluster zoning report or recommendations. And then maybe these, if this application goes ahead, maybe it's talking about, those action steps to implement or something. So maybe we're looking at something in the fall. I don't know. I don't know, Daniel, if you know what's the next steps to request a committee of the whole, or I'm not sure. Or Councillor Morse, does that kind of go through you as councillors?
Well, you'd want to request, but I guess it's just looking at the agenda planner and seeing when there would be time. But if we want to do a committee of the whole meeting, then we could just do a doodle poll and select. So is it better to do the committee of the whole before the accelerator fund? We don't meet in August traditionally, so.
I know that's why when I look at this, Councillor Morse, I kind of look at like that's probably realistically it's like a September, October thing, unless you want to do it July.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering, because then the application's gone in, we've identified the action steps, and then it's actually more about like talking about what's going to be, how that's going to move forward. Yeah, I would think. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we had cluster zoning, land use bylaw review, which and the description here, sorry, there's another page that has a little short description. Review the land use bylaw, provide recommendations to council regarding removal of barriers to the creation of diverse housing. So I think that's definitely still on our radar and something we'd like to do if we can this year.
Didn't you do something already last term on that?
We did the secondary suite, a review of the secondary suite. Is that right, Daniel? I can't remember if we did a full bylaw. I don't think we did a full
I know
bylaw.
Fritz has.
It says done work. Mhm.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, Daniel. I'm
Yeah,
so
no, that's
good.
fine. And then in terms of OCP review, I know it's in Council's strategic plan for this term in terms of OCP. Sorry, evolve the OCP. So this kind of would be a key piece, I think, for the Housing Advisory Committee to bring a report and say, you know, when Council's considering changes to the OCP, these are things that we have flagged either as like, these are things that are missing, or these are things that are impediments, or these are things that, should be included or not included. That seems like good timing.
Yeah, I'm actually, yes, and I'm thinking maybe that's something that also gets discussed in committee of a whole, although now I'm maybe very ambitiously making it a very big agenda, but
Right.
yeah, that would be also a good target, like a good deadline. If we did say do maybe an October kind of date. September's tough because then you have to get a bunch of stuff ready for September. So maybe if it's more like October or later, and then we do a bunch of work to get ready for that committee of the whole. And obviously we can kind of pare down and you know what the agenda really is, but maybe if we aim for that, to have that a review of the land use bylaw, review of the OCP, just like you say, just to highlight things that either we, you know, in a way we can do a whole thing on it, but okay, so yeah, I think let's keep those on the plan for this year. Yeah, Fritz, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's probably, this sounds maybe a bit strange, because in a way you would think you first do the OCP and the land use bylaw flows out of that, which of course is a normal way of doing it. But to make people aware of where the issues are, it may actually be better to first do the land use bylaw, and so that it takes a little bit of thought which focus should be first, because to some degree it's creating awareness that something is in the way, right? And then you get people's attention, and then is what are the solutions? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, and Fritz, I know you've done lots of work and we have lots of notes and everything. So maybe it's maybe we'll sort of strike a subcommittee, and that's something you and I, and if anybody else in the committee wants to work on, and we can have a couple of meetings to look again at all the work Fritz has done already, and then kind of figure out, I think you're right, Fritz, how do we present that? Do we do one first? Do we do them together? Do we, we can tackle that. So yeah, let's keep that on. I
don't see any problem in presenting them both at the same time.
Well, yeah, but Alison, there is this, the OCP is full of amazing goals, but they tend to conflict with each other. Like, for instance, the housing objectives may all be very nice, but the reason why they're not implemented sits in a different section. Like, it's not that easy, you know, it's not like, here's the OCP, read the residential part.
Well, no, and that's why I'm suggesting you present them both together, because there's problems in one that are that are not problems in the one, but they're become problems when you look at the other. And
I thought it would be good to leave council with a certain amount of discomfort for a while, and then you have
okay, well, the OCP review is on council's agenda package, and if there's problems in the land use bylaw that could be fixed with the OCP review, then that's good. But if there's problems in the land use bylaw that could be fixed with a very simple change, then maybe it could happen without waiting for the OCP review.
Yeah, no, you're right. I'm just saying is that it's more the idea that if we have a bit of a conscious plan, it's almost like, you know, what I do a lot as an architect, I prepare for a meeting, and then some of the drawings that you need or things that you have to do are really prepared for the meeting. It's just for one step. You know what I mean? It's not claiming to be the full solution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can definitely work on that. I think we'll for the moment lump those together, and then we'll see as we work together what that ends up being presented at the committee of the whole. Okay. Oh, I lost my. Oops, there it is. Okay, proactive rezoning. That's an interesting one that I think would hopefully could still be on our radar, but
well, that fits with some of those accelerator fund steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking, I also want to be realistic about what we can achieve, given the fact that we're 5 months in, summer's coming. You know, we probably have Yeah, we kind of have 4 to 6 weeks of time that people are actually going to be maybe doing stuff and paying attention. And then we have like, September to end of November, really. So yeah, I think let's keep it on our radar. I would probably not put it maybe too high on the list at the moment. And it might be, and I've realized maybe there's also an opportunity, and I don't know if it's at the same committee of the whole or separate. And I haven't had time. I believe the Mayor's Standing Committee on Community Land is still meeting or has begun to meet
I have
again.
no idea.
Or it's not. It's not. Okay, Steph's shaking her head. Okay, does that committee still exist?
It
Oh, it
doesn't. Like a
doesn't.
mayor's
Okay.
standing committee dissolves at the election, and then
Okay.
the next mayor could reform.
Okay, so yeah, it would be, that was sort of on my list because it would be community lands likely that we were talking about, but we could expand that. Anyways, let's keep it on our radar. I'd say not too high on the list at the moment. Number 5 is, so I'll go with the list here. Review the Lot 1 request. So I think, yeah, let's put that on our list. Let's see, I think that's achievable for this year, just to at least have a look at those. Yeah, okay, so yeah, let's keep that on the list. Housing Reserve Fund review. I think the notes we had on that was subcommittee to work with the CFO to explore options, potential review of policy. Yeah, at the moment, it's not super high on my list. I sort of feel like that this accelerator fund and the MRDT are probably like the two kind of most obvious ones. So if there's anybody in this committee who has a passion for that and wants to put that on their list and really follow it, maybe we can move that up. But I'd say for now, let's kind of move, in my opinion, like let's move that down, but for sure jump in if that's something that you're really interested in and you want to work on. Yeah, speak up. And by the way, jump in at any time because I'm kind of reading here and everybody's faces are really small. So if I'm not seeing a waving hand or something, just unmute yourself and jump in. Housing. Okay, so what's next on our list? Develop a housing policy versus affordable housing policy. Yeah, so I think let's keep that. I doubt that would be something that would happen like this year, but we could start it. And certainly if that accelerator fund application goes through, I think that's something we can, maybe even do an outline this year and then it actually starts, the work starts next year, something like that. And again, that might not be us. Maybe we're just supporting the planning department on that creation of that. So we can figure out, maybe the goal this year is, create an outline, figure out who's doing what and how we can support the staff and how much work they want us to do on that. And then next one, workforce housing. Focus on, this is the note I have here, focus on employee housing in 2023, including housing policy, engaging with employers. That could be an interesting one to maybe have a joint meeting with the Community Economic Development Committee, because I know that they've done some work on this. And so maybe that's our step, at least the first step would be to have a meeting with them, see what they discovered, see what they're working on, and maybe just sort of brainstorm together steps that we could be taking. Any other, and like I say, jump in. I'm just sort of mumbling away here to myself. Yeah. Okay. And cash in lieu review. I think actually that one, because it's come up and we've done so much discussion, I would really move that one up the list. I think that is something that we can start to tackle. And whether it's sort of just a smaller thing that happens sooner, or whether it's part of that bigger housing policy, that is something that gets inserted into it. But I think that is something we can do a little bit of work on, since we've already done a lot so far. It'd be really nice if we could kind of finish that up and have a draft of something.
So just thinking about that one and thinking about the Housing Reserve Fund. I mean, the Housing Reserve Fund exists. So is the issue with the Housing Reserve Fund, how do we get money into it? And that's where the MRDT comes from, and the cash in lieu review. I mean, are there other issues with the Housing Reserve Fund, or is it just how to fund it?
It's just how to fund it. That was the note I had, was basically to, are there other things that we don't know of that we're not seeing?
The description is more, rather than review, it's Housing Reserve Fund, how to fund it. Like, take the review out. It's not the policy itself. It's how do we get money into it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the only part of the policy that might need some clarification is the cash in lieu.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good
can
point.
we put the cash in lieu up with the housing fund?
Yeah, I'd agree. So I think, they can be looked at. like I say, I think the cash in lieu as a report and MRDT is sort of would be more active things I want. But if, like I say, if anybody wants to jump in with other ideas or to have a subcommittee to do some research. And I know Ron did say in his email that he couldn't make it. He did say he's willing to do some research. So we might, maybe we could assign him something if we find something here. He's very good at his research, so we can throw him on that. What's next on the list? Oh,
to clarify,
Yeah.
to clarify, the cash in review, that is looking at funding, ways of funding, as opposed to the formula that is to be developed at some point with regards to how to determine what developers need to pay.
I'd say my intention with, and maybe Steph, we could cash in lieu review. I would say a cash in lieu policy development or formula development, something like that is more accurate. I think that's a good question, Greg. And then I think you're right. They are sort of linked with the Housing Reserve Fund, but really that's its own standalone one. And that is one way that funds the Housing Reserve Fund. But that line that we had about Housing Reserve Fund was to explore other ways to fund it. Like the cash in lieu we know, the MRDT we know, now the Accelerator Fund. But that was the idea behind that one was, is it worth spending some time to look into something else? Because we don't know it's out there and maybe there's other ways we could be funding that. So that's what that line was about. Does that answer your question, Greg? That clarifies it? Yeah, okay. And then, yes, yeah, Fritz.
Yeah, I just want to say that if you want more affordable housing units to be built, and I think density bonusing is a big deal, because like if the zoning has 2 steps, it can even be predictable, right? So you can say, well, you can have this density with, you can encourage people to build more because they could not have built that square footage if it wouldn't be affordable housing. And then because you know what I mean? It's more like that's because in zoning you can embed all kinds of amenity zoning, bonus zoning,
And is that part of the bylaw review and the OCP review? Do you think that work, or is this a separate, or does it belong to something else, or is this a whole separate line item you're thinking?
Well, I just
because I would think that lands in that land use bylaw review.
Well, it does, but it has impact on the net result of how much affordable housing you provide. You see what I mean? And I find these affordable housing funds, they never grow very fast. It's just not enough that goes in there. But with density bonusing, you can probably achieve more faster.
Because when we developed the first policy, I mean, we were basically considering that the developer community would build the affordable housing, that we wouldn't, it would take us a long time to get enough money in the reserve fund to build it. And so does it fit under the sort of proactive rezoning? Or is it the land use bylaw and density bonusing?
Well, my thought, Fritz, sorry, go ahead.
Well, it sits in zoning, but it certainly can sit in proactive zoning because that's actually the same thing. Because then you can say from, well, here's our zoning, and if you provide more density, you can have that as long as it's affordable housing. And I think in a cash flow, if a developer looks at rental housing, I mean, you can see there's now more interest in rental housing, right? Lately in the development industry. That means that implies at least that gap is smaller. Like it is not like only market housing is affordable. You see more and more buildings going up with rental. So that means that affordable rental may still be of interest to a developer. And because they do probably all kinds of cash flow projections going way forward, like that same unit, how is that performing over time?
Well, and I think a lot of it's there's pretty good government incentives for them to be building rentals and everything at the moment. So yeah, I think that could be part of the land use bylaw review and maybe part of the proactive rezoning discussion. Daniel, I don't know if we have it, but I know Vancouver for sure has the rental house, like rental only zoning or something. I can't remember if we have that here or not. So those kinds of ideas, right?
Any of our zoning, but we have the ability to do it.
Right. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, that is really good because that means that the land historically would be worth less, right? Of course, that was the key part.
Okay, so then at the end, we had speakers. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas for speakers. I feel like we have a lot on our agenda, so I'm not sure, unless there's something remarkable that sort of comes up. I feel like maybe not this year, with a committee of the whole coming up, maybe a joint meeting with the Community Economic Development Committee, and then these few priorities. I think that's probably a lot for us to work on accomplishing. And yeah, okay. Is there any other thoughts? Do we want to, so the only thing that I would probably, yeah, I think, Steph, you were trying to put timing to things, which is great.
Yeah, we
Um,
need to prioritize them, figure
Yeah,
out what we're going to do first,
yeah.
et cetera.
So I would say maybe if we put October, November on a committee of the whole with council. And then working up to that. So then September, October, and yeah, I'd say committee of the whole, because I don't think we're necessarily going to just limit it to cluster zoning now. Yeah, like a housing in general committee of the whole. And then I would say, well, now to, October would be those land use bylaw review and OCP review. And I think that would be some subcommittee work, and we could maybe do some work offline and then bring it to committee meetings and kind of get feedback as we moved through it. So that could be ongoing. I'd say, Steph, if we could move proactive rezoning like down the bottom, and again, jump in if anybody has other thoughts. And I'd say housing reserve fund, that line too, I'd probably move down the bottom.
Yeah, the MRDT is on council's strat plan radar. And yeah, so.
Yeah, so I think we don't need to necessarily push anymore on that. And it could be something that comes up when we meet with the Community Economic Development Committee, maybe or something, but it could just be sort of a topic of discussion. Let's see, I feel like maybe then sometime, I think it would be too soon to do it sort of in the next 6 weeks, but I'm open to it when we could meet with the, oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Review of the lot one. So maybe we could do that, yeah, at our next meeting, or if we do have a July meeting, we could look at those and see where that's going. Yeah.
We better
I think
ask
that could-
Daniel for that question,
Okay.
timing
Yeah.
wise.
I don't think I'd be ready. And
Oh,
I'm not,
okay.
I honestly don't remember where that is at, or if that was only ever discussed with council that closed.
Yeah,
I
and
think-
I'm not
yeah, I
sure where it is in the strat plan either, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Okay. So we'll put that one as a maybe.
In the fall,
Maybe in the fall. Okay.
yeah.
So then, maybe at the next meeting, we could continue our discussion about cash and lieu. I don't know. So cash and lieu could be sooner than later because it's still fresh in
Yeah.
our minds.
Daniel
maybe
hasn't
that's-
done his second report to council on the coming rezoning, so
Okay.
we don't have a reaction to that, but
Okay.
we've done so
yeah.
much work, it seems logical to try and put it into a formula at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's put that for June, July. I like having the develop a housing policy as kind of a towards the end of the year. And I think that would be, like just a brainstorm session, outline it, see where planning the staff needs wants our input or what we can do for them. So I think that could be towards the end of the year after the committee of the whole. I think that would be good. And then, I think the joint meeting for workforce housing, I'd say sometime in the fall, let's kind of see where they're at, and maybe it's after the committee of the whole, because I feel like we'd probably be doing a lot of work to get ready for the committee of the whole, and then so maybe that can be a follow-up afterwards, have a meeting with them, see what's on their plans and radar as well.
Well, isn't the results of that workforce housing something that would be relevant for the community of the whole? Well, at least they did a CEDC did a survey, right, Steph? Yeah, she can't nod. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a survey. It's probably the results are out there. Sorry, they're not on the top of mind as to
Yeah.
what they were.
Mine
So,
either, so.
okay. And I just want to watch our time as well, because I think we were supposed to be wrapping up soon. So is everybody okay to go for just another sort of 10 minutes? Yeah. Okay. So I know Lois had to go. So yeah, but I think we're basically done here. I'd say speakers, let's leave it off for this year unless, something pertinent pops up. And yeah, I'd say we'll bump the rest of that down. So does that sound good? We'll have June, July, we'll talk about cash in lieu. We'll do a subcommittee work, Fritz and I and anybody else. We can start talking about land use bylaw and OCP. And then we have a bunch of stuff sort of earmarked for the fall. Does that look good? Everybody? Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so Steph, and sorry, and you can't talk to us. Is there anything else you need from us on this, or is that clear, or does that? Yeah, that's good. Okay, all right. Well, let's move along. We have 5.1 council updates. Councilor Morris, is there anything you'd like to update us on?
I was just right there. Well, in the information items is the strategic plan. And there is housing is definitely in there. As I mentioned, the coming rezoning got first reading. I'm just having a quick look. We had an excellent meeting with MP Patrick Weiler, and he talked about their federal housing strategy. And so maybe we should circulate that to everybody, and also the accelerator fund. And the other issue was there's something called a community work, what we used to be called the gas tax fund, and now it's the community building fund, which is the Infrastructure Canada grants. And those are up for, that program ends in 2024, the current round. And so they're in the process of renegotiating the agreement and all that sort of stuff. So we're hoping to get a little more general money for, excuse me, for communities and so it's not earmarked. You don't have to apply for a specific grant, but we get it and we can put it away and accumulate it to build something. So that sort of thing might help with the funding for the sewer plant or some, expansions and things like that, which would help development in the cove. So that's a work in progress. And Daniel, if you can think of anything else that I don't think there was. You all know that the Cape Roger Curtis lands were actually purchased by Metro Vancouver, but so the long rezoning process is happening, and that's keeping Daniel nice and busy. And I think that's very quickly basically it. But and is everybody on the list to get the updates from council on the council meetings? Because if you're not, maybe we can just ask Steph to add you all.
Is that different from, I'm on like a general list for the municipality. I get like an email once a week that says, here's what happened. Here's the update, the highlights from the council meeting. Is that the list you mean?
Yeah. But you can pick different things that you want to get. So maybe, if you go
signed up ages ago, I can't remember.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that just helps, and then you get everything. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, and if anybody's wondering, Steph just put in the message that the link's in her signature. So if you can just sign up for Muni News. I'm sure it's somewhere on the website as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Councilor Morris. If nothing else, then we have, I think, oops, I've lost my agenda here. I was looking at the strategic plan. It's nice. It's 6 pages. It's very succinct. I like it. I'll have a closer look at it. Yeah, I think it looks great. So I think our next is just if there's any new business. So if anybody else has anything that they're interested in bringing to the table, but it doesn't look like it. Nobody's jumping up and down. Okay, so we will adjourn. Oh, good. Only 2 minutes late. Excellent. And next meeting. I almost forget. So
do you really want to do the next meeting on the Friday of the long weekend?
I'm away.
Nope. No, thank you. No. So let's figure out, so preferably the last week of June, which is the 26th.
But we could 23rd, which is the Friday before. Yeah,
that's fine for me. I guess Greg and Fritz.
Yeah, okay.
Steph's away on the 23rd. So does that mean we can't do it then, Steph, because you're not there? Oh, she can get somebody to do it for us. Okay, let's stick with that because this time seems to work for everybody. I don't want to throw a wrench in the works. So we'll aim for the 23rd, same time, 9:30 to let's say to 11, and hopefully we'll finish faster. Well, obviously we'll get the agenda out before then, but thank you everybody for your time. Sorry, we're a few minutes over, and yeah, thanks for everybody, and we will see you soon. Okay, have a great day. Bye.
Right.
Thanks.